My husband cheated on me, then threatened the other woman with leaking her intimate videos, so I drove him into insanity and had him committed. 2 years later, he's begging me to tell everyone the truth. I was once walking my child to school when I noticed one of the moms glaring right at me. So I did what I always do in these situations. I simply started at her back. You see, my husband is a stud. Green eyes, curly hair, stable income. So it wasn't rare for women in our daughter's class to give me dirty looks. If anything, I lived off of it. Like, yes, you know what I have, and you can't have it. Mwaha. Anyway, usually this only happens once and my death state scares them off enough to never try again. But then I saw her do it again the next day, and the next day. I was honestly close to clocking her, but then I noticed something. One time, there were tears in her eyes, like she was heartbroken. And if there's anyone you can count on for gossip, it's the moms. So I did some digging and found out she was a single mom, never had a husband in the picture, and was new to the area. I honestly thought she was just trying to be my friend. So the next week, I gave her a chance. I always saw her being bubbly with the other moms, so I felt pretty comfortable doing this. But the second I turned to her to strike up a conversation, her eyes fell to the floor. She put her hand on her stomach as if to stop herself from hyperventilating. So then I figured it was just social anxiety or something, until I got in the car. Honey, why the F were you talking to that woman? My husband yelled with pure rage in his eyes. Well, my husband never yells, so my first reaction was to start crying. I think he realized he was overreacting, because that's when he put his arm around me and claimed to have not gotten his first coffee of the day yet, as his explanation. I nodded, but fear still clouded my mind. So much so that I didn't even mention the woman again. I was sort of hoping an explanation would just somehow fall into my lap, that it would be simple and lighthearted. Honestly, I think deep down, I knew the truth. That same day, as I got our daughter ready for bed, Ben's mommy told me to give you this. She said if I read it, a monster would come after me. Can you tell me what it says? Ben, of course, is the mystery woman's son. I nodded, thinking it would be some sort of kind-hearted apology. Oh, how wrong I was. At the very top of the piece of paper read, open when you're alone. So I told my daughter I would tell her in the morning, before kissing her forehead and turning off the light. I locked myself in the bathroom. Every possibility ran through my head. Was the teacher a creep? Was my daughter secretly being bullied? But it wasn't any of these things. Luckily, the letter read, your husband has been threatening me. I never knew you guys were together. I'm sorry. That's it. There was no other explanation. It was like some dystopian treasure map written by a person with schizophrenia. So I went downstairs and opened my husband's favorite bottle of whiskey. As soon as he heard the bottle open, he was practically drooling for a glass. I practically filled it to the brim, and he swallowed it down in under a minute. And just as planned, the next morning he was too hungover to go to work or drop off our daughter at school. So like the loving wife I am, I made him breakfast in bed and reassured him that one day off wouldn't do any harm. I dropped off Bella extra early so I wouldn't miss Charlotte, Ben's mom. And that's when I saw her. As soon as she waved goodbye to Ben, I cornered her. One thing about me, I'm a girl's girl. I will always prioritize a woman's safety above all else. Charlotte, I need you to explain what's going on. You have my word that I won't tell. Okay. She said it without hesitation, like she knew this conversation was bound to happen. She then followed me to my car and whipped out her big black iPhone. I wasn't sure what she was doing, but then she opened a message and began to scroll. My heart dropped when I read the name at the top. So before I continue the story, there's some information you need to know. Me picking our daughter up from school is a very new thing. Before it was my husband who was assigned to that. So Charlotte had genuinely believed he was a single, unmarried father. With my own eyes, I read my husband's threats. He had clips of them making love and dozens of intimate photos. He said he would leak them to the school, her family, and her workplace, because she had found out he had a wife, me, and wanted to make sure I knew the truth. I swallowed the bile in my throat. Charlotte took my hand. She promised to help me with whatever part of the divorce process I needed, as long as I made sure her stuff didn't get leaked. But I shook my head. I didn't want that. He had not only broken my heart, but he broke our home. Our baby girl won't get to grow up with two parents. I wanted something worse than divorce, something that would destroy him. I started noticing changes in him about 3 weeks into my plan. Little things at first. Shadows beneath his eyes, a tremor in his hands, the way his gaze darted to his phone every few minutes with mounting anxiety. He was unraveling thread by thread, exactly as I'd intended. Everything okay at work? I asked one evening, my voice dripping with manufactured concern as I set his dinner plate before him. He rubbed his temples, wincing. Roger keeps saying I sent him bizarre emails, but I swear I didn't write them. And yesterday my presentation files were all corrupted somehow. Numbers scrambled, projections completely off. I frowned sympathetically while satisfaction bloomed in my chest. Tara from accounting had come through beautifully with those files. Subtle adjustments that made him look incompetent without being obvious sabotage. That's strange, I murmured, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Maybe someone has it out for you? The seed of paranoia took root immediately. His eyes widened before narrowing. You think so? But who would do that? I shrugged, the picture of innocent confusion. I don't know, honey. Do you have enemies at work? He spent the rest of dinner silent, mentally cataloging everyone who might want to sabotage him. The irony that his biggest enemy was sitting across the table completely escaped him. That night, while he showered, I went through his phone again. His password hadn't changed. My birthday. And I had about 7 minutes before he'd emerge. I quickly sent a text to his boss. About that client dinner tomorrow. I think we should invite Melissa from accounting. She and I have some ideas to discuss. Melissa was Roger's wife, and everyone knew they were having marital problems. I deleted the message from his sent folder and put the phone back exactly where he'd left it. The next morning, he was a mess. Roger had called him at 6 a.m., furious about the text. I swear I didn't send it, he insisted, pacing our bedroom. Why would I suggest bringing his wife? Everyone knows they're practically separated. I gasped appropriately, hand flying to my chest. That's terrible. Could someone have gotten into your phone? He stopped pacing, his face paling. You think someone's hacking me? But how? Why? I suggested changing his passwords, which he did immediately. Of course, I watched carefully as his fingers flew across the screen, memorizing each new combination. The next phase involved Charlotte more directly. We arranged for her to accidentally run into him at the grocery store while I was conveniently shopping in another aisle. I watched from behind a display of cereal boxes as she approached him, her expression carefully crafted to appear terrified. Please, I heard her whisper loudly enough for me to catch. I haven't told anyone. I swear. Just leave me alone. Before he could respond, she hurried away. When I rounded the corner with our cart, his face was ashen, sweat beading on his forehead despite the store's aggressive air conditioning. Was that Ben's mom? I asked innocently. She looked upset. He flinched visibly. I don't know. Maybe. Weird, I commented, placing a box of Bella's favorite cereal in the cart. Want to grab some of that whiskey you like? You seem tense. That night, he drank 3 glasses of the whiskey I doctored with non-alcoholic spirits. All the burn with none of the buzz, growing increasingly frustrated when he didn't feel its effects. I watched him from over my book, noting how he kept checking his phone, jumping at small noises, glancing out the windows. I think someone's following me, he confessed after his 4th glass, voice tight with anxiety. At work? At the store? I keep seeing the same faces. I set my book down, the picture of concern. Honey, that sounds serious. Maybe you should talk to someone professional. He shook his head adamantly, eyes wild. Number no doctors. I'm not crazy. Of course not, I soothed. But stress can do strange things to perception. The next day, I enlisted Vanessa's help for the next step. She worked at a pharmacy and helped me acquire some mild sleeping aids that I could crush into his food. Nothing dangerous, just enough to make him groggy, to blur the lines between what was real and what wasn't. That evening, I made his favorite pasta dish, carefully lacing his portion with the crushed pills. As we ate, I casually mentioned, oh, I ran into Charlotte today at the coffee shop. His fork clattered against his plate, sauce spattering like tiny blood droplets on the tablecloth. What? What did she say? I blinked innocently, tilting my head. Nothing really. She seemed nervous. Is there something I should know? No, he said quickly, his voice pitched higher than normal. I barely know her. I nodded slowly, letting doubt creep into my expression. Okay, it's just, she acted weird when she saw me, like she was afraid. He pushed his plate away, his appetite suddenly gone, but he'd eaten enough of the doctored food. Within an hour, he was fighting to keep his eyes open on the couch, his words slurring slightly. I feel strange, he mumbled, head lolling against the cushions. Really tired suddenly. Poor baby, I cooed. You've been working so hard. Why don't you go up to bed? I'll be up after I clean the kitchen. Once he was asleep, I went to work. I moved his wallet from his pants pocket to his sock drawer. I switched his toothbrush with a new one of a slightly different color. I changed the time on his watch by 17 minutes. Small things he might attribute to fatigue or forgetfulness. But my masterstroke came next. I used his sleeping thumb to unlock his phone, then sent messages to 3 women from his contact list. Coworkers, nothing romantic, saying things like, can't stop thinking about yesterday, and let's keep what happened between us. Then I deleted the sent messages but left the confused replies that would come in the morning. The next morning, he was disoriented and confused, running his hand through his hair as he searched the bedroom. My watch is wrong, he muttered, and I can't find my wallet. It's in your sock drawer, I said without looking up for my coffee. You put it there last night, don't you remember? The doubt in his eyes was delicious, like watching dark clouds gather before a storm. I don't think I did that. I looked at him with concern, my brow furrowed just enough. You definitely did. You said you wanted to remember to get new socks today. Are you feeling okay? Before he could answer, his phone chimed, then again, and again. 3 messages in quick succession. I watched as he read them, his face cycling through confusion, panic, and fear. Something wrong? I asked, sipping my coffee. No, he said quickly, shoving the phone in his pocket. Just work stuff. But I could see the questions forming in his mind. What had he done? Had he messaged these women? Why couldn't he remember? Over the next few days, I escalated my campaign. With Tara's help, we arranged for a woman he didn't know to approach him in a coffee shop near his office. You need to stop calling me, she said loudly enough for others to hear. I'm not interested, and I'm going to report you if it continues. He was bewildered, protesting that he had no idea who she was. But the damage was done. People had seen, had heard. Whispers would spread through his professional network. At home, I continued my psychological warfare. Items disappeared and reappeared in strange places. His clothes would be subtly rearranged in his closet. The temperature on the thermostat would change inexplicably. And all the while, I was the perfect concerned wife, suggesting he see a doctor, get more rest, take vitamins for his memory issues. I think someone's coming into our house, he told me one night, his voice tight with fear, eyes darting to the windows. Things keep moving. I'm not imagining it. I widened my eyes, clutching his arm. That's terrifying. Should we call the police? But he backtracked immediately, shaking his head. No, no police. They'll think I'm crazy. Why would they think that? I asked innocently, watching his face carefully. He didn't answer, but I could see the doubt eating away at him like acid. Was he losing his mind? Was he doing things he couldn't remember? Or was someone really tormenting him? The answer, of course, was yes to all 3. Charlotte provided the next piece of the puzzle. She sent him an anonymous email. I know what you did to those women. Stop now, or everyone will know. When he received it, we were having dinner. I watched his face drain of color as he read it, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Bad news? I asked, cutting into my chicken. No, he said, his voice strained. Just spam. But later that night, I heard him in his home office, pacing and muttering to himself. I stood outside the door listening, savoring each word like fine wine. They can't prove anything, he whispered. There's no evidence. No one would believe them anyway. I smiled in the darkness of the hallway. He was starting to crack, hairline fractures spreading through his carefully constructed facade. The next morning, he called in sick to work. Said he had a migraine, but I knew better. He was afraid to leave the house, afraid of what might happen, who might approach him, what evidence might surface. I played the supportive wife, making him tea with honey, suggesting he rest. But when he finally fell asleep on the couch, I slipped into his office and planted my next surprise. A small voice recorder hidden under his desk, set to randomly play a whispered, I know what you did, at intervals spaced far enough apart that he'd question if he'd really heard anything at all. That afternoon, he burst out of his office, wild-eyed, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Did you hear that? He demanded, looking around frantically. I looked up from my laptop, the picture of confusion. Hear what? A voice. Someone whispering. I frowned, concerned. Honey, there's no one here but us. He ran his hands through his hair, tugging slightly, leaving it standing in disarray. I know what I heard. Maybe it's stress, I suggested gently. You've been under a lot of pressure lately. He didn't respond, just went back into his office and closed the door. I heard the lock click into place. That night, I put the next phase into motion. Using a burner phone, I texted him. The women know. They're coming forward. All of them. I watched from across the living room as he received it, saw the panic bloom across his face like a bruise. He quickly blocked the number, but the damage was done. Everything okay? I asked, looking up from my novel. Fine, he said, his voice strained. Just work stress. I nodded sympathetically. You know you can talk to me about anything, right? The irony of my offer hung in the air between us, unrecognized by him. The next day, Tara called me with news. He'd been acting erratically at work, accusing colleagues of sabotaging his files, checking over his shoulder constantly, locking himself in his office for hours. Roger's concerned, she told me. He's talking about requiring a psychological evaluation. Perfect. That evening, I suggested we have friends over for dinner that weekend. It might help you relax, I said, massaging his shoulders as he sat rigidly at the kitchen island. You've been so tense lately. To my surprise, he agreed, nodding slowly. Perhaps he thought appearing normal to our friends would help him feel normal. Little did he know I had already coordinated with Charlotte, Vanessa, and Tara. Each would play their part in what I was now thinking of as his final unraveling. The dinner party was set for Saturday. I spent Friday preparing, cooking his favorite foods, setting the table with our best china. He seemed calmer, almost hopeful that things were returning to normal. That night, while he slept, I made my final preparations. I placed a woman's earring, not mine, under his side of the bed, just visible enough to be found eventually. I installed a small device Tara's IT friend had given me that would make our smart home system go haywire during dinner, lights flickering, music changing, thermostat fluctuating, and I made sure the doctored whiskey was fully stocked. Saturday arrived. I was a bundle of nerves and excitement as I prepared the final touches for dinner. Our guests would arrive at 7, 2 couples we'd known for years, plus a surprise I'd arranged. At 6, he came downstairs looking better than he had in weeks. He'd shaved, dressed in his favorite blue shirt, even styled his hair. For a moment, I felt a pang of something. Not quite regret, but remembrance of who I thought he was before I knew the truth. You look nice, I said, and meant it. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen in weeks. Thanks. So do you. I'm looking forward to tonight. I think I've been, I don't know, going through something, but I feel clearer now. I nodded, hiding my disappointment. Had he stabilized? Was he adapting to my psychological warfare? I couldn't have that. Honey, I said casually, could you check the guest bathroom? I think the light bulb might be out. While he was upstairs, I quickly sent a text from my burner phone to his. I'll be at your house tonight. Time to face what you've done. I heard his phone chime upstairs, followed by silence. Then footsteps. Faster, heavier than before. He came down looking pale again, a vein pulsing at his temple. Everything okay? I asked, arranging cheese on a platter. Fine, he said tightly, knuckles white where he gripped the banister. The bulb is fine. Our first guest's Guests arrived at 7 on the dot. Nathan and Stephanie, a couple we'd known since college. Next came George and Beverly, neighbors from down the street. My husband seemed to relax slightly, falling into familiar social patterns, though I noticed how his eyes kept darting to the windows, how he startled at every sound. And then, at 7:30, the doorbell rang again. I excused myself to answer it. Charlotte stood on our porch, looking nervous but determined, her dark hair swept up elegantly, wearing a dress I'd helped her choose for maximum impact. Is he ready? She whispered. I nodded. As ready as he'll ever be. I led her into the living room where everyone was having drinks. The moment he saw her, my husband's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor, wine spreading like blood across the pale wood. What is she doing here? He demanded, his voice strangled. I feigned confusion. Charlotte? I ran into her at the store yesterday and invited her. I thought it would be nice to get to know the other school parents better. I turned to our friends. Charlotte's son, Ben, is in Bella's class. Everyone smiled politely, but the tension was palpable. Charlotte gave a small wave, avoiding direct eye contact with my husband. Where's Ben tonight? Stephanie asked conversationally. With his grandmother, Charlotte replied. She was happy to have some quality time with him. My husband was frozen, staring at Charlotte like she was a ghost. I touched his arm gently. Honey, you spilled your drink. Let me get you another. I guided him to the kitchen, away from the others. As soon as we were alone, he grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. Why is she here? He hissed, eyes wild. Are you trying to drive me crazy? I widened my eyes, the picture of innocence. What are you talking about? She's just another mom from school. You know who she is, he insisted, his grip tightening. This is part of it, isn't it? Part of whatever's happening to me. I pulled my wrist away, rubbing it for effect, letting my eyes fill with tears. You're hurting me, and you're not making any sense. Should I ask everyone to leave? The suggestion horrified him. Canceling would mean explanations, questions he couldn't answer. No, he said quickly. No, I'm fine, just surprised. Then let's rejoin our guests, I said calmly, though my heart was racing with triumph. Back in the living room, I positioned him directly across from Charlotte. Throughout dinner, I watched him watching her, jumping whenever she spoke, flinching when she reached for the salt or her wine glass, sweat beading on his forehead. The smart home device worked perfectly. Halfway through the main course, the lights dimmed dramatically, then brightened to an almost painful level. The music, which had been playing softly in the background, suddenly blared before cutting out completely. What the hell? Nathan asked, looking around. Sorry, I said smoothly. We've been having some electrical issues. The electrician is coming Monday. My husband stared at me, suspicion clear in his eyes. I met his gaze innocently, taking a sip of wine. The temperature dropped next, the air conditioning suddenly blasting cold air through the vents. Our guests hugged themselves, commenting on the chill. I'll check the thermostat, my husband offered, clearly eager for an excuse to leave the table. While he was gone, I leaned toward Charlotte. You're doing great, I whispered, squeezing her hand under the table. When he came back looking frustrated, I announced it was time for dessert and coffee in the living room. As everyone migrated, I hung back to serve the cake, giving Charlotte time to position herself. When I entered with the dessert tray, Charlotte was standing by our family photos, holding one of my husband with Bella at the beach last summer. Your daughter is beautiful, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. She has your eyes, she added, looking directly at my husband. He froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips, a muscle twitching in his jaw. The implication was clear to him, though innocent sounding to everyone else. She knew Bella had been comparing her to her father. Thank you, I replied smoothly. We think she's pretty special. The evening continued with this undercurrent of tension. Every time Charlotte spoke, my husband flinched. Every time the smart home glitched, he grew more agitated. Finally, as Nathan was telling a story, my husband stood abruptly, causing everyone to fall silent. I need some air, he announced, and walked out onto the back patio, the door slamming behind him. I gave it 30 seconds before following him. I found him gripping the railing, knuckles white, breathing heavily. What's going on with you? I asked, keeping my voice low but firm. You're being rude to our guests. He turned to me, his eyes wild. Don't pretend you don't know. You invited her here on purpose. This is all part of it. The messages, the voices, things moving around the house. You're doing this to me. I took a step back, letting hurt and confusion show on my face. What are you talking about? What messages? Honey, you're scaring me. Stop it, he hissed. Stop pretending. I know you know about her, about all of them. This is your revenge, isn't it? I let tears fill my eyes. I don't understand what you're saying. Know about who? What revenge? Maybe we should call Dr. Martinez. You haven't been yourself lately. The mention of a doctor, one we didn't actually have, pushed him over the edge. He grabbed my shoulders, fingers digging into my flesh, shaking me slightly. There is no Dr. Martinez. You're making things up, planting things, trying to make me think I'm crazy. Let go of me, I said, my voice trembling. You're hurting me. The patio door slid open, and Nathan stepped out, his silhouette backlit by the warm light from inside. Everything okay out here? We heard raised voices. My husband released me immediately, stepping back as though burned. I let a tear fall, touching my shoulder where his grip had left a mark. We're fine, I said shakily. Just a misunderstanding. Nathan looked unconvinced. Maybe we should call it a night. No, my husband said quickly, panic flashing across his face. No, everything's fine. I'm just tired. Let's go back inside. But the damage was done. The rest of the evening had a strained quality, our guests making excuses to leave earlier than planned. Charlotte was the last to go, giving me a significant look as she thanked me for the evening. After everyone left, my husband and I stood in the silent living room, the remains of our dinner party scattered around us. What was that about? I asked quietly. Why would you say those things? Why would you grab me like that? He ran his hands through his hair. I don't. I can't explain it. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Things keep happening that I can't explain. I approached him cautiously. Like what? Talk to me. For a moment, I thought he might confess everything. The affairs, the threats, all of it. Instead, he shook his head, shoulders slumping in defeat. Nothing. I'm just tired. I think I need to sleep. As he trudged upstairs, I allowed myself a small smile. The evening had gone exactly as planned. Our friends had witnessed his erratic behavior, his aggression toward me. Charlotte had established her connection to our family in a way that would seem innocent to everyone but him. And most importantly, he was beginning to doubt his own sanity. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time for the final act. I cleaned up the kitchen alone that night, methodically washing each dish while planning my next move. The dinner party had accelerated things perfectly. Now I had witnesses to his breakdown. Upstairs, I could hear him pacing in our bedroom, the floorboards creaking rhythmically with each turn. When I finally went up, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, the picture of defeat. Do you want to talk about what happened tonight? I asked, keeping my voice gentle as I changed into my pajamas. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, dark circles beneath them like bruises. I don't know what's happening to me. I sat beside him, not too close. You haven't been yourself lately. The outbursts, the paranoia. I'm worried about you. I'm not paranoid, he snapped, then immediately softened. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm being watched, like someone's messing with me. I placed my hand on his, the picture of wifely concern. Maybe you should take some time off work, or talk to someone professional. He pulled his hand away. I don't need a shrink. That night, he tossed and turned beside me, mumbling in his sleep about evidence, and they're coming. By morning, the dark circles under his eyes had deepened, and his hands shook as he poured his coffee. I think I will stay home today, he announced, not meeting my eyes. Good idea, I replied, kissing his cheek, feeling him tense at my touch. Rest will help. As soon as I dropped Bella at school, I texted Charlotte. He's home today. Time for phase 2. She responded immediately. On it. I ran errands for 2 hours, giving Charlotte time to work. When I returned home, I found him in his office, the door locked. I knocked gently. Honey, I brought lunch. Silence. Then the sound of papers shuffling. The lock clicked, and he opened the door just enough to peek out, one bloodshot eye visible in the crack. Not hungry, he muttered. Over his shoulder, I could see papers scattered everywhere, his computer screen showing multiple open windows. He was searching for something, hunting desperately for answers. What are you working on? I asked innocently. Nothing, he said quickly. Just work stuff. Throughout the afternoon, I heard him moving around upstairs, opening drawers, shifting furniture, muttering to himself. Charlotte had done her job well. While he was in the shower that morning, she'd slipped into our backyard and placed a burner phone in his secret hiding spot, the loose brick in our garden wall where he kept emergency cash. On the phone were dozens of threatening texts to various women, including her. I knew exactly when he found it. The thud of something being thrown, followed by a string of curses, then silence, heavy and ominous. When he came downstairs an hour later, his face was ashen, eyes hollow. Everything okay up there? I asked, looking up from my book. I heard a noise. Fine, he said, his voice hollow. Just dropped something. That evening, he barely touched his dinner, his eyes constantly darting to his phone. I noticed he'd changed his password again. I'd have to watch more carefully this time. Nathan called today, I mentioned casually. He wanted to make sure everything was okay after last night. His fork clattered against his plate. What did you tell him? That you've been under a lot of stress at work, I said with a shrug. That we're fine. Relief washed over his face, quickly replaced by suspicion. That's it? You didn't tell him anything else? I frowned, tilting my head. Like what? He shook his head. Nothing. Never mind. The next morning, I woke to find his side of the bed empty, the sheets cold. I found him in the kitchen, unshaven, still in yesterday's clothes, staring at his laptop. Did you sleep? I asked. Couldn't, he muttered, not looking up. I peered over his shoulder and saw he was scrolling through his email, checking sent messages, looking for evidence of things he didn't remember doing. Perfect. I'm taking Bella to school, I said, touching his shoulder. He flinched. Should I call Roger and tell him you're sick again? He nodded absently. Yeah, thanks. At school, Charlotte was waiting for me by the fence, her face flushed with excitement. Did he find it? Oh yes, I confirmed. He's falling apart. She handed me a USB drive. Tara got these from his work computer. Emails to other women, dating back 3 years. I pocketed it, already planning how to use this new ammunition. You're sure they can't be traced back to her? Charlotte shook her head. Her IT friend made sure. It looks like they were accessed from his home IP address. When I returned home, he was still at the kitchen table, but now surrounded by papers, bank statements, phone records, receipts, spread out like the workings of a deranged mind. What's all this? I asked, setting down my purse. I'm trying to figure out who's doing this to me, he said, his voice tight with frustration. Someone's setting me up. I raised an eyebrow. Setting you up for what? He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in days, searching my face for any sign that I knew. I kept my expression neutral, concerned but confused. Nothing, he finally said. Just work politics. That night, I implemented the next phase. While he showered, I quickly connected the USB drive to his laptop and transferred the emails to his drafts folder. Then I set up an automated email to his entire company contact list, scheduled to send at 3 a.m., with the subject line, the women I've manipulated, and several of the most damning emails attached. I was in bed, pretending to sleep, when his phone started buzzing around 3:30 a.m. The emails had gone out. I heard him curse, fumbling for his phone in the dark, then the frantic typing, the panicked breathing. No, 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 he whispered. This isn't happening. I stirred slightly. Honey, what time is it? Nothing, he said quickly. Go back to sleep. But he didn't come back to bed. I heard him downstairs, pacing, making calls that went unanswered at that hour. By morning, he was a wreck, unshaven, unwashed, wild-eyed. I can't go to work, he announced, ever again. I frowned. What happened? Someone. He swallowed hard. Someone hacked my email, sent things, terrible things. I widened my eyes. What things? He shook his head. I can't talk about it, but it's over. My career is over. I made a show of comforting him, suggesting we call the police to report the hacking, knowing he would refuse. He did, almost violently. No police, he said firmly. No authorities. The next few days were a blur of his deterioration. He stopped showering, barely ate, jumped at every sound. He'd taken to sleeping in his office, the door locked from the inside. I heard him on the phone occasionally, his voice pleading with Roger, with IT support, with anyone who would listen that he'd been hacked, set up, framed. No one believed him. Why would they? The evidence was overwhelming. A week after the email incident, Roger called me directly. We're concerned about him, he said carefully. His behavior has been erratic. The emails, the accusations, the paranoia. Has he seen anyone professional? I've suggested it, I said, letting my voice break slightly. But he refuses. He's not the man I married anymore, Roger. I'm afraid sometimes. The seed was planted. Roger promised to handle it and asked me to keep him updated. The final phase began the next day. I invited Nathan and Stephanie over for dinner. Just a casual weeknight meal. My husband tried to refuse, but I insisted. They're worried about you, I said. They just want to help. He relented, too exhausted to fight. When they arrived, I made sure Nathan had a moment alone with him while Stephanie helped me in the kitchen. How are you holding up? I heard Nathan ask him. You seem stressed? My husband laughed bitterly. Stressed? I'm being systematically destroyed and no one believes me. Throughout dinner, my husband made increasingly paranoid statements about being watched, about conspiracies at work, about someone breaking into our house to move his things. Nathan and Stephanie exchanged concerned glances. I played the supportive but worried wife perfectly. After they left, he confronted me in the kitchen. You think I'm crazy too, don't you? I chose my words carefully. I think you're struggling with something, and I think you need help. Help, he repeated flatly. A nice way of saying you think I should be locked up. That's not what I said, I protested, but the idea was planted. The next morning, I woke to find him gone. Car missing. No note. I called Roger immediately, letting panic seep into my voice. He left sometime in the night. He's been talking about people following him, about conspiracies. I'm worried he might hurt himself. Roger promised to alert security at the office. 3 hours later, I got the call. He'd shown up at work, confronted Tara in the break room, accusing her loudly of helping to frame him. When security approached, he became combative. They had no choice but to call the police. I rushed to the station, the picture of the distraught wife. They had him in a holding cell, pending a psychiatric evaluation. When they let me see him, he looked terrible, disheveled, eyes wild, pacing the small space like a caged animal. You, he said when he saw me, his voice cold. You did this. I let tears fill my eyes, aware of the officer watching nearby. Honey, please, let them help you. Stop pretending, he shouted, lunging toward the bars. The officer stepped forward protectively. You, Charlotte, all of you, you planned this. You drove me crazy. I stepped back, a hand to my mouth. I don't understand, I whispered. Who's Charlotte? That was the final straw. His eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in fury. He began shouting incoherently about conspiracies, about women he'd threatened, about evidence being planted. The officer gently led me away as my husband's shouting echoed down the corridor. Has he been like this long? The officer asked kindly, offering me a tissue. I nodded, wiping away tears. It's been getting worse for weeks. I didn't know what to do. The psychiatric evaluation was a formality. With his recent behavior at work, the emails, the witness statements from our friends about his paranoia and aggression, plus his outburst at the station, the diagnosis was clear: acute psychotic break with paranoid features. They transferred him to a psychiatric facility for observation and treatment. I visited daily, the devoted devoted wife, bringing photos of Bella, speaking softly about how we'd get through this together, all while he glared at me from across the table, occasionally bursting into accusations that only reinforced his diagnosis. Charlotte, Vanessa, and Tara kept their distance now. Their parts played perfectly. The evidence of his affairs, his threats, his manipulation existed only in private messages between us, in the burner phone I disposed of, in conversations no one else had witnessed. To the world, he was simply a successful man who had suffered a breakdown under the pressure of work and family responsibilities. A tragic but not uncommon story. 3 weeks after his commitment, I filed for divorce on grounds of his mental instability. The judge granted me full custody of Bella, our house, and most of our assets. His parents, horrified by his condition but sympathetic to me, didn't contest anything. I visit him occasionally, always with Bella, always playing the role of the supportive ex-wife who still cares. He's heavily medicated now, his accusations muted by antipsychotics. Sometimes I see a flash of the old clarity in his eyes when he looks at me, but it quickly fades. No one believes a madman. Charlotte moved away last month, a fresh start in a new city. Before she left, she hugged me tightly. "You're terrifying," she whispered, "but I'm glad we met." I smiled. Girl's girl, remember? We protect each other. As for me and Bella, we're doing fine. I've started dating again. A kind, honest man who treats me like gold. Bella asks about her father sometimes, and I tell her he's sick, that he loves her but his brain is confused right now. Someday when she's older, perhaps I'll tell her more, or perhaps not. Some stories are better left untold. I still have the evidence, of course. Everything Charlotte showed me that day in my car, everything Vanessa and Tara contributed. Insurance, just in case, but I doubt I'll need it. His doctors say his condition is chronic, that his paranoid delusions about conspiracies and being framed are deeply entrenched. Sometimes I wonder if what I did was wrong, if there was another way. But then I remember his threats, the women he hurt, the fear in Charlotte's eyes. I remember how easily he lied, how completely he fooled me for years. No, he got exactly what he deserved. A prison of his own making, reinforced by the very manipulation tactics he used on others. Poetic justice, really. And me? I sleep just fine at night.